Hello, everybody. I'm Cynthia Kitchen, Director of Library Services. I am presenting Streamlining Your Course Materials with e-reserves or electronic reserves. This presentation is part of our collaborative faculty partnerships workshop series. The recording and slides will be sent to attendees after the session, and the recording, as always, will live on the library's YouTube channel. I'm going to employ accessible presentation techniques. And so this means that I will tell you when I'm going to change slides. And on slides that have informative images, I'll describe what's displayed. Decorative images will not be described. So first things first, what are course reserves? When I say course reserves, I mean the readings, and I say readings a lot throughout this, but it also means streaming films. It means a lot of things. But um, course reserves in general are readings that you want students to have for your course. The difference is that instead of each instructor building and maintaining a different patchwork of links and uploads and PDFs, the library helps you manage the process so that it holds up all semester. So electronic reserves are course reserves that are available online to students in your Brightspace course. And most of the time, that means persistent links to library licensed content. So, such as a link to a streaming film that we have access through our collections. Um, Links are easier to maintain. They also usually provide the most consistent experience for students. In some cases, an e-reserve might also be a PDF scan or a file when that's allowed, and it's the best option if it's the best option for access. I'm advancing to the next slide. So, faculty experience. I want to start with what we hear most often from faculty when it comes to course readings, and this might sound familiar. First, links break in Brightspace. This happens often. You build a reading list, and then a vendor platform changes. You might have a YouTube video, and then that gets pulled down and it's no longer available. Maybe a URL expires, or maybe a resource moves to a different login, or somehow students can't get in. Second, materials often end up scattered. Some of your materials might live in Brightspace, some might be in email, some might be in a shared drive, or on a publisher platform. Third, copyright feels tricky and unclear. That's not just for you all, it's for us too. Is this PDF okay to upload? Can I share a chapter of my textbook? What does fair use mean in a course? It's really easy to feel unsure when it comes to copyright. Fourth, accessibility adds in another layer. Even when you might have the right file, it may not be usable for all students. PDFs in general aren't accessible. They're usually unreadable for screen readers. Scanned pages might not have OCR. Pictures might not have alt text, and videos might not have corrected captions. And so faculty shouldn't have to be experts in all of that. We can help with that. And then finally, the cost piece, even when we're not talking about a full textbook, students run into cost delays, limited access, and when they can't get to a reading right away, it creates extra emails and troubleshooting that generally lands on the instructor. So now we'll move to the student experience. From the student side, as mentioned, when materials are difficult to access, students often don't have what they need on the first day of classes, and they might be waiting on a paycheck or financial aid or a bookstore order, or they're just trying to figure out which link is the right one. So if you have a first week read this before a class assignment, obviously they're going to start already behind. A second issue is confusion. If readings are posted in multiple places in your course or items have inconsistent labels, students may not always be sure what is required versus what's optional, or which version to use. Then there's cost. Again, when access is unclear, students might buy something they don't need. They might pay for an article from the internet. We get that a lot. Or purchase a textbook, even if most of the content happens to be available through our libraries. And as we know, if a student's trying to solve a problem quickly, they don't necessarily think about all of their options. And when access fails, troubleshooting usually lands everywhere. Students will email the instructor, IT, tech hub, libraries. They may not explain the problem clearly because they don't actually know what the issue is. And so that just creates extra work for the instructor, and it can take a lot to untangle that. So, how do we solve these issues? So, this is where e-reserves come in. E-reserves give students one clear access point. And so an example of that is all of your readings posted in the library resources module that is in all of the Brightspace course shells. Instead of readings living in 5 different places or in multiple modules, we help you organize them so students know exactly where to go for all of their readings. Um, Second, we focus on day one access. I mentioned this, meaning students are prepared for class when they start school. We use persistent links, as I mentioned, that are designed for long-term access. It's different than a link that will time out, so you're just less likely to deal with broken links throughout the semester. And if something does change, which does happen, we can help troubleshoot that and fix it in your course. Copyright stress, we try to reduce it. We check licensing terms of items. We apply fair use if we're able to. Accessibility support, if course content needs to be remediated, we help with that. It might need OCR, it might need a better format, or maybe a different access method. And also, we do try to lower costs or at least help when for students when possible. And often that means we try to get faculty to use resources we have through our library collections, maybe open educational resources which are free, or suggesting alternatives when, something is really expensive and maybe we can get it into a different format for students to make it less expensive. Moving to the next slide. So what counts as e-reserves? And I know I keep mentioning readings, but it is a larger scope. A lot of e-reserves are content that we have access to through the libraries. Might be articles, it might be ebooks in our databases, but these are things that are already licensed to us, so everybody has free access that we pay for. Ebook e-reserves can also include scanned excerpts from a print book when that's allowed. And the key with that is excerpt. We rarely can put in a full textbook. You really can't do that into a course, but we might be able to put in a chapter or something like that. We look at what portion you need, how it's being used, and whether scanning will will be approved through fair use. Streaming media is really common. A lot of faculty love putting streaming films from our collection in their courses. YouTube videos can be helpful, but it's harder because they can be taken down at any time, and you don't necessarily have warning. And so we often have faculty have one in their class and then they're like, it's gone, what do I do? And so then we try to work with you to find an alternative. We use open educational resources, like I mentioned. Those are openly licensed, freely available resources that students can use, and we don't have to worry about copyright, which is nice. Um, and finally, e-reserves can also include instructor-created content, so things like your own readings, your lecture notes, case studies, maybe a file you've written yourself. And like I said, it's worth noting that like full textbooks almost never can be put into a Brightspace course. It's just not allowed by copyright. There are times where if we have an ebook that we've purchased and we've purchased an unlimited user sort of license on it, that means like 30 students could use it at one time. In that case, you could put a link to that ebook. And we do have instructors do that. And it's really nice because students don't have to go anywhere for it, but right in their course. And so let's look at the life cycle at a glance here. So this slide image shows the big picture map of the whole process beginning to end. eReserves follows a predictable life cycle, starting with the time you make your request to finding the best format option, to copyright, accessibility checks, to posting, and then maintaining the materials through the semester. Um, and I'm not going to go into each step because I'm going to walk you through one at a time after this. The main point is that there's a clear workflow behind the scenes that we used. So, and we, partner with faculty on this through all of the stages. So moving to step one, this is the part that makes everything else go smoothly. So, the more complete requests you can give us, the faster we can find what you need. And then really all we need from faculty is maybe your syllabus or a reading list. Then we can get to work. Due dates are also a little helpful because then we kind of prioritize, like if you have a bulk of your readings you need up front in the first couple of weeks of class, we'll want to work on that before worrying about, things that are due later on. Um, if you have a mix of materials, maybe videos, maybe articles, maybe books, it also helps to kind of flag what's required versus optional because that will help us prioritize, our work as well. But yeah, once we receive the request, we look at each item and choose the best sort of access path. And that might be going through our resources and linking. It might be scanning something if we need to, scanning a print material. And then we also look at accessibility to see, like, is it something we need to remediate before we can actually put it into your course? Next, we'll look at item format. So our first choice is usually a stable link if we can. And that might be to somewhere on the internet. It might be to our library databases. It might be directly to an article itself or an ebook. If we don't have it licensed, then we try to find maybe a free version online that is accessible. Sometimes an author has a copy in an institutional repository or something like that, a copy of an article. Um, and then if it's something in print, like I said, we may be able to scan a portion of it to put into Brightspace. That does happen. It just kind of depends on the licensing. And then when none of that works, we just try to find alternatives and we work with faculty on that. I'm advancing to the next slide. This is the part that usually causes the most stress, and this is what we get the most questions about. So I'll keep it simple. Um, the goal is to make sure students have access to the items without having to become, a copyright expert. We're not experts. You're not experts. We're not lawyers. We're librarians, but we do the best we can to work around and try to get things passed through fair use because we're an educational institution. So we have a little bit of leeway, which is nice. So yeah, when you send us your reading list, we review the items, figure out what the licenses allow, and do our work from there. And when fair use does not clearly apply, or maybe the portion of what you want of the book that you want to use is too large, again, we just work with you to find options. And sometimes that looks like maybe we put a chapter in of a book for a few months and take it out and put another chapter in just to sort of get around some of the legalities. Next, we'll look at accessibility. So step four is about making sure the readings not just are not just available to students, but they're usable for all students. A lot of access problems are really just format problems. So a PDF might open, but it might be a scanned image with no readable text. So somebody using a screen reader would not be able to hear what is actually on that PDF. A document might be missing headers, so that makes it hard to navigate with a screen reader. And a video might not have corrected captions. So a student watching the video wouldn't necessarily have the same access as another student if they're missing key parts of a video. So what we do is help with that. We make PDFs accessible. We can correct captions. We can correct headings. We do that for a lot of faculty. And sometimes the best accessibility fix is actually just choosing a different access path. So maybe a database link, we might link to a database as HTML full text rather than a PDF, and that will take care of that accessibility issue. And there are occasional cases where a file just can't be made accessible quickly enough, or it's the only copy available is just a really poor copy, a poor quality copy. And if that happens, we usually try to tell you early so that we can work with you to find something else. But it definitely does happen, especially the older materials, older books. Usually the scans just don't look great. Um, I'm advancing to the next slide. So this is where everything comes together, and things go in your Brightspace course. Students should be able to just click once, get to what, they're reading or whatever it is that they need to do without confusion. And usually most of the time, if we can link to things, that's better than uploading them. Uploads just tend to cause some issues, and broken access. When we do post a file, we do it intentionally. We try to use correct formatting, very clear titles, consistent labels, such as like read this article or watch this video, so it's very clear. And then we try to use a logical order kind of tied with what dates you gave us for due dates. And it just reduces the sort of like, where is it email and stuff from students that you get. The other thing we do is include a copyright statement at the top of the library resources module. And that just alerts the students to say, like, even though you can download PDFs and other things from this course, please don't, because it's meant for only the students in the course by copyright law. Finally, we'll move to the last step in the cycle, which is maintenance. Even with the best setup, things can change during the term. Platforms update, links do break, even library links break. License terms and authentication paths, all of that stuff shifts, and we usually don't get any warning from our vendors. And so if students report a problem, we usually can diagnose it pretty quickly, but it does, definitely reach out to us. And this is also where we try to help reduce the constant troubleshooting that tends to always land to faculty. They're, the student's first contact. You can certainly point to students to us, or to Tech Hub. You can alert us, and we'll try to find a different path or a different way to access it, or update what we did in there. Moving to the next slide. So here's what this looks like in a course. So let's say for week 3, you assign 3 different things: an article, a book chapter, a short video. For the article, the best path might be a library database link. And so we'll use a persistent link in there, and we usually always include the citation as well, so students know where that came from. The persistent link also makes students authenticate through our subscription, so it tells so that they definitely have access. The book chapter, we choose the best option, again, is ideally for students anyway, for cost wise, if we can get an ebook with multiple licensed readers through the library's collection, that's amazing. Doesn't always happen, but if we only have it in print, we might, maybe we'll be able to, for those 3 weeks, or for the week 3, provide a chapter, a specific chapter that's needed, depending what's allowed. And for the video, you can use YouTube links. We're always asked that question. Of course, you can use YouTube, but it's freely available. But again, they disappear a lot, so you just don't have a lot of say over that. And so we try to find what we can through our streaming film platforms, and we have a lot of them. So, and then we make it student facing. So we put everything, like I said, with consistent labels into that library resources module. So what does this look like in Brightspace? So this is an example of what e-reserves may look like in a course. On the left is an image of the library resources module, and that's standard in all courses. On the right is a screenshot of e-reserves, and this is in a history course. And as I mentioned, we always put that copyright notice at the top, and so that students understand expectations and that, materials don't leave the course. Also, this particular instructor has accessible web pages you can see, as well as videos and other things. And the green icon indicates a perfect accessibility ally score, which is great. I'm advancing to the next slide, which is the wrap up. Um, so e-reserves can help students get reliable day one access to course readings and other things while also reducing the time you spend troubleshooting links and managing files and worrying about copyright and all of that. We really try to partner with faculty in this. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or if you run into situations or anything like that. I'm gonna stop sharing here and I'm gonna stop recording.